Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wall Street from Main Street podcast. My name is Mo Daoud, and today's special guest is a returning guest, is Jeffrey Tucker. He is the Chief Liberty Officer and founder of Liberty.me. Jeffrey, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Mo. Appreciate it.
Hi, Jeffrey. I want to start off with the podcast by talking about Bitcoin, which is you are a big proponent of Bitcoin, and it's been in the news lately. We saw a big drop in the value of Bitcoin from $311 to $221. There's a lot of speculation on what happened. I know you don't focus on the value of Bitcoin, but you focus more on the advantage of using Bitcoin over fiat currency and gold and silver. But I read an article today, and they talked about the drop due to a growing power struggle over the future of the cryptocurrency that is dividing its lead developers. What are your thoughts on the drop, and do you believe Bitcoin will be replaced by another cryptocurrency in the near future?
Yeah, I seriously doubt that this great struggle within the Bitcoin community today is the cause of the drop. It's always true in financial markets that people see price movements and they want to know why. Well, a lot of times you don't ultimately have one reason why. There's many factors. It could have been many things. There's a big price run up. As the crisis in Ukraine heated up, and there was a sense of fear of global panic in Europe, actually, with Greece and so on. So it's not a surprise to me that we would see a pullback in the price a little bit, the exchange rate. I don't necessarily think that has anything to do with the threat of a fork, which I don't actually think is very serious. For your listeners who don't understand, the Bitcoin protocol has to follow a consensus model because it's entirely open. Everything that happens to Bitcoin, everybody knows about. What that means is that everybody's sort of involved in the decision making, and the controversy over the allowing larger attachments in the blockchain and expanding it and making it more efficient has divided the community. And so part of the community has forked the chain to create a so-called Bitcoin XT, and the majority of developers and users disagree with this, but it's become a kind of a little bit of a the daily prattle in the cryptocurrency world. But I seriously doubt it has anything to do with the price drop.
Oh, okay. So why is there a divide over expanding the capacity of the blockchain? What would be the disadvantage of expanding it?
Well, I think I wish I could understand it a bit more. But there's advantages and disadvantages to both. The advantages are that it makes the blockchain more useful, and that's beautiful for things other than cryptocurrency. That allows the expansion of the blockchain for purposes of law and the development of more complex commodified information arrangements. The disadvantages are that it becomes more difficult to host it, essentially. And some people think that it's going to lead to a greater degree of centralization of hosting of the chain. So, so that's a serious matter, And people have always worried about this, actually. If it becomes impossible to host the chain and all the nodes, the individual nodes that want to host it, just because of the sheer size, then Bitcoin's become sort of captive of a corporate oligarchy with too much power. So I understand that concern. I do. But, I have confidence in the open source model. For years before Bitcoin, I followed controversies on things like the WordPress development platform, which is also some of the open source. People argue, they make a lot of noise, there's a lot of factions and disagreements, but, in the end, crowdsourced technology, if people are invested in it and care about it, it ultimately, everything's okay. And I think everything's going to be just fine with Bitcoin.
One of the main advantages of using cryptocurrency is it provides an alternative for people that don't want to hold their money in fiat currency, which over time goes to zero. And also, people don't want to carry gold and silver because it's not something that you can carry around when you go out to buy groceries or go out for dinner or whatever. So, do you believe Bitcoin can replace gold and silver as a safe haven when things go belly up, like what we're seeing in Greece and Venezuela?
Yeah, I think your question is a very good one. I think, actually, Mo, that, and I know this opinion is a little bit controversial, but I think that Bitcoin has already replaced traditional safe haven currencies. In fact, I think that's its number one triumph. It's become a place where people go to in the event of crisis. And I think we've seen a lot of empirical evidence of this over the last 3 years. That every time there's a big monetary crisis, Bitcoin's pushed up in value and gold has just not responded. And I really think it's time for everybody to essentially stop watching the gold price. I don't think it's the thing that responds in the event of a crisis anymore. In fact, I think that that responsiveness of gold ended, basically 6 years ago, actually, and which is quite a thing to say after 6,000 years, in which gold and other precious metals have been the safe haven. To say it's been replaced by a piece of software, that's quite a claim, but I think it's true.
Yeah, and in the Austrian circle, there's a lot of people that buy gold and are gold bugged as well. So yeah, I don't think anybody saw this coming as a software replacing hard asset as an alternative currency.
No, I certainly did not see it coming. In fact, I was a denier for a very long time. I mean, probably, I guess 3 years went by. Let's see, 2009. I guess three years went by before I clued into what was going on because I just didn't believe it was possible. But the fact is, Mo, that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, just the cryptocurrency distributed ledger, cryptographically protected model of exchange, it provides advantages over traditional currencies. In the same sense that e-books are better than regular books, and emails better than the post office, and streaming movies online is better than having to go to the movie theater and watching a big reel. I mean, it's an improved piece of technology for monetary purposes. The two ways in which it's massively improved. First of all, Bitcoin replicates all the features of gold. Its scarcity, its divisibility, its durability, its fungibility. All those features are replicated perfectly in the Bitcoin world. But it has two additional features that gold doesn't have. One is that it takes up no space, meaning you don't need bankers to store it for you. And the second thing is that it's weightless. So its transport costs in terms of time are reduced down to just a few seconds instead of weeks or months. So in that sense, Bitcoin is vastly advantageous to gold and silver.
Right. So what do you think needs to happen for Bitcoin to go to the next level in terms of popularity and becoming more accepted as use? I mean, we're starting to see a few companies starting to accept Bitcoin, like Overstock.com and other companies online. So is that the next step for Bitcoin to become more popular, to having more merchants accept Bitcoin?
Well, so one of the things that afflicts Bitcoin is actually very interesting. I think there's a little bit of a Gresham's law effect taking place in the Bitcoin world. What I mean by that is Gresham's law says that artificially overvalued currencies will drive out undervalued currencies. So if you have a currency that works for transaction purposes that is sustained by government in some way, people are going to prefer that to the currency that's actually a higher value, but is not legally able to be exchanged as readily. What happens is that people tend to hoard the more valuable currency and spend what they believe over long-term given expectations is going to be less valuable currency. And that's exactly what's happened with Bitcoin. I mean, people are holding on to Bitcoin. and Bitcoiners don't spend their currency. I mean, it's just even though there's massive opportunities to spend it, um, people who get Bitcoin just don't spend it for the most part. So this is, in some sense, holding us back because it's keeping the price, more or less stable. It's funny, Mo, because people used to complain that Bitcoin was too volatile. Now the complaint is that it's not, high enough in value. I don't know what the right exchange rate for Bitcoin is. I'm actually relatively happy with where it is. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's relatively stable and has been for a couple of years now, or 18 months or so. But it is holding back the wider distribution of Bitcoin just because most people have the sense that it's going to be much more valuable in the future, so why spend it in the present? So what could change that? I think your implication of your question is right. What will change it, and it'll change it overnight, is something like a monetary crisis. Under those conditions, all bets are off, and I expect that Bitcoin will just take off in a shocking way.
Well, the future of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, the market in general, that's very exciting, and also the blockchain technology and what they're doing with that as well. Very exciting, and it's very good because it's providing a good alternative for people that want to get out of fiat currency, which all over around the world it's getting debased due to the currency wars. And you're looking at China right now; they are devaluing their yuan in a very big way and in a very short amount of time. So I think Bitcoin will be a great alternative for people in China that want to get out of their currency.
Oh, I think that's right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
So I want to shift gears here and talk about what's going on in the economy. And there's a lot of debate going on that related to what Austrian economists talk about a lot, and one of them is minimum wage. The debate on minimum wage is becoming popular over the years. Is this a coincidence, or is this one of the many unintended consequences of the government-mandated inflation policy that they implement?
Yeah, very well could be. I'm not sure I understand why this whole subject of the minimum wage is heated up so much. I mean, this is very, very frustrating for economists or people who believe in, basic laws of the universe. Actually, if you implement a wage that's really high, you're going to cut out those people who cannot match their marginal revenue product to that wage, and you're going to create unemployment. I mean, there's just no question about that. The right minimum wage is zero, as the New York Times editorial page said some years ago. Actually, on their editorial page, which is amazing. But, I think these lessons are forgotten from time to time, and now, you've got a big sort of push to raise it and raise it. It's really a disaster. I mean, it's a disaster for everybody, especially for the poor. I mean, we should never forget that the minimum wage originated as an idea by people who favored eugenics. They wanted to wipe out the poor and the underclasses and the people they considered to be inferior races and exclude them from the labor markets and say to them, you can't earn a living, you can't be part of the labor force. And in so doing, they hope to limit their reproduction, essentially. They wanted to wipe out the inferior peoples in one generation. That was their goal. That was the whole purpose of the minimum wage. And that generation, I'm talking about in the progressive era, that imagined such things was ghastly in their ethical values, but at least they understood economics. Nowadays you have people that are very well intended on their ethical values, but they don't understand economics. And so they, as a result, they're rallying around the minimum wage, the worst enemy of the poor. It's egregious. And my heart breaks for everybody who is a victim of this policy, and of which there are many, many millions.
And one of the problems that Americans don't understand that support a raise in minimum wage is that they see companies like Costco or Whole Foods that pay their workers very well, like the wages, it's double digit at least for people that go there and start working there, and they think, oh, if they doing it, then companies like McDonald's and all these other companies should be able to do it too. Because look at Costco, they're doing fine. But the problem is the economy is not one size fit all. I mean,
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's also a more insidious motive why these large companies favor the minimum wage, because they know that if they can impose higher costs on their competitors, which they can through the minimum wage, then they actually face a less competitive environment for their products, and they can drive out of business their competition. And that's what happens. That's what happens when you raise the minimum wage. What you do is you subsidize well capitalized companies at the expense of their upstarts. That's why Walmart favors raising the minimum wage. That's just the way it is. Business doesn't like competition, and small companies that pay low wages or relatively low wages, that can be super efficient. They represent a competitive threat to the large corporate cartel.
I agree, and we're seeing the negative effects in cities like Seattle that implemented the $15 minimum wage, and a lot of the restaurants are shutting down because for the small restaurant, their profit margin is slim. And the average I read is around 5%. So any increase in labor costs, there's no sense for them to be in business. So a lot of them are shutting down.
Yeah.
Now, LA they're gonna increase their minimum wage as well. So
no, it's true. I don't think any of this would happen. I mean, basically you have a conspiracy here at work between labor unions, large corporations, well-heeled business people, heavily capitalized corporatist businesses, working hand in glove with a lot of well-intended, economically deluded, mostly left-wingers, unfortunately, and they're working together to increase this price control on wages, and it's a disaster, really. It doesn't affect you at all if you already earn larger at the minimum wage or higher. The real victims of this policy are the poor and the people who are just starting out in the labor market. I mean, we've seen right now teenage unemployment is at record levels. I mean, there's no data we have that shows that young people have never been this unemployed before. This is a major reason why. They're just discouraged. They're not being hired. And if you can't get that first job, as a teenager or in your early 20s or whatever it is, that's a terrible thing for your career. And that's what the minimum wage does. It shuts out new hires and people who are disadvantaged in the marketplace.
Now, one of the reasons why the debate on minimum wage is becoming popular is also connected to income inequality, and the gap has become wider and wider ever since the financial crisis. Now, we all know within the Austrian circle that raising minimum wage will not work. It will make it worse. So, but how do we solve this problem of income inequality that we have in this country?
I think the best way to solve the problem is to get rid of government regulations. I was very interested to find out, I guess it was about 3 weeks ago, the Council of Economic Advisors had been tasked by the Obama administration. This is an executive-level department called the Council of Economic Advisors. It was founded after World War II, during and after World War II, to kind of as a central planning brain trust in a way. But they were tasked with discovering why it has been so difficult to see job creation take off since 2008. And one of the position papers they came out with pointed out that in the 1950s, 1 out of every 20 professions was, or jobs in certain particular professions, was not blocked through occupational licensure, but now 1 in 4 is. So in order to enter into a new profession, you have to get a license. And the Council of Economic Advisors of the Obama administration said this is a major reason for the lack of job creation. And they sent out a recommendation that all states and federal governments, and the federal government and all states and local localities repeal occupational licensure, with the exception they made a proviso for when the health of the public is at stake, as a way of creating jobs. And it's a remarkable document because it's exactly right. And it came out from the Obama administration. It's 100% correct. It's government regulation that prevents job creation. And yeah, that would go a long way to eliminating income inequality. In many ways, the U.S. economy is heavily cartelized and corporativist. So that if you're privileged, you get to play the game. If you're not privileged, your costs are too high. And the major barrier to job creation in this country is government itself.
And another root cause of income equality, I think, is the government destroying the currency, because a lot of people cannot fight against inflation, as well as people that are elite or wealthy.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, inflation's always benefited the elites. The elites are going to make money regardless. The people who are fleeced by government and central banks are the poor and the middle class. They're the ones who pay the price.
I agree. Well, we're seeing that right now due to financial repression, unfortunately, and the great wealth effect transfer that's happening in this country and other countries as well. So we briefly discussed labor union, but I have one question about that, and I think this question comes up a lot. So I want to ask you and get your thoughts on it. And do you believe labor union would have a role if we operate in a free market society? Because they tend to create misalignment in the labor market and many industries.
Well, it's hard to say because labor unions have been captive of government now for a very long time, probably close to 100 years, maybe longer. So nowadays, when we think about labor unions, they're mostly government agencies. I mean, they're extensions of government power. And certainly that was intensified during the Great Depression with the Wagner Act. The Taft-Hartley Act of the 1950s corrected the imbalance to some extent, but corrected it on the other side. So, I mean, for listeners who don't understand this, what happens is the Wagner Act privileged labor unions against capital. Taft-Hartley corrected in the other direction and privileged capital against labor, finally achieving something of a balance, but there's coercion in both directions. I mean, the question that a lot of free marketeers ask is, what would be the role of labor unions in a free market? And I think in the 19th century, and certainly earlier, it's pretty obvious. It's for specialized crafts, where there's very few people who can perform it, and it takes a high degree of specialization, and they live in a small geographic region. They can actually, labor can exercise something like collective power as a bargaining unit. And that's sometimes successful, sometimes not, but certainly it's people's right to do that. I mean, we still see some of that nowadays, like a union I'm very sort of familiar with. It's not exactly a labor union, but it's an attempt to collectivize labor services and extract a high wage, is, of all things, organists, people who play the instrument, the organ. And they have a guild. They even call it the Organ Guild. And they have specified wages that they want organists to make. And if anybody's paid less than that, they boycott, the employer and so on. I mean, the question is, has that been effective? And I think the answer to that is no. It's actually been catastrophic. I mean, the organ has never been less popular as an instrument, and the organists have never faced a tighter labor market than they do today. So, no, I mean, I think these guild tactics are, for the most part, very, very bad. It was short-sighted in a way. I mean, I understand why musicians do it, because they don't understand economics. I mean, these people are mostly very shy, artists who don't understand anything about the commercial marketplace. But it's usually a very bad idea, even in a person's own self-interest, to organize yourself in terms of a guild. But I agree, though, that they have the right to. I mean, anybody has a right to get together and make any demand they want. But on the other hand, they're going to have to pay the price for it. And the organist is a good example of that. I mean, the organ's never been less popular.
So, a labor union for the organ players, I've never think that would ever happen.
No, it's it's out there, and it's very sad actually because the organ is a wonderful instrument, but the organist guild in America has played a huge role in making the organ unpopular, unaffordable, and destroying essentially the market for organists because they're asking too high a price, and they're expecting everybody to pay it through intimidation and that sort of labor union organizing. I don't know. Labor unions seem so old-fashioned to me. I mean, I just don't. I don't know what role they could possibly play in a globalized digital marketplace. It seems silly to me. I don't want to deny anybody the right to form a union, but I think empirically, it's just generally a bad idea, and especially in the 21st century, for goodness sake.
Right, and I think the image of the labor unions have taken a hit lately. If you look at the taxi union all around the world, pretty much, they're fighting against Uber and Lyft and all the innovative companies that's trying to provide cheaper, competitive prices for customers that need a ride to point A to point B. And I don't know if you saw the video, and I think it was in Brazil, but there's a lot of taxi drivers that were trashing the Uber cars and beating up the drivers. So.
Oh, it's just outrageous. I mean, just outrageous what the left is doing towards the peer-to-peer economies. I mean, I think that what's happening here is that you've got a lot of people who are dedicated to socialism, essentially, and to the old order, and they're seeing their world slip away from them, and they're panicked about it. And Uber has become, a kind of a target in that sense.
And then I think that's sad because I saw people kind of wake up from a financial crisis and try to break out of the mold of the socialism and big government policy that...
Well, that never happens. People never learn. We always think that people... I mean, look, I thought after 1989 that nobody would ever be a socialist again. But now we've got, one of the front runners in the Democratic nomination to run for president of the United States is self-proclaimed socialist. So... Yeah,
so you're not surprised to see that Bernie Sanders is rising in the polls?
Yeah, it makes me laugh, and it's sad. It's funny. After 1989, I really did believe that the battle was pretty much over, that the great debate between capitalism and socialism had been solved, had been run, had been decided, and that turned out not to be true.
Well, I haven't been on this earth long enough, but I'm disappointed because I thought people would start waking up. But the poll, the reflection of American attitude, and they still want big government. They think, if we do a little bit of this differently, then the financial crash won't happen anymore. Like, yeah, we'll see, because history repeats itself all the time.
Absolutely,
in this country.
Absolutely, it does. You're exactly right about that.
So one last topic I want to discuss before I let you go. Now, you wrote an article on Donald Trump that went viral on Liberty.me. So are you surprised by that, and are you surprised the support he's getting in the polls?
I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm afraid that I'm not. I think that the Republican Party has always had an undertone of fascism about it. And I don't mean that just as an insult. What I mean is that fascism is a specific ideology. It combines nationalism, nativism, bourgeois values, a love of blood and kin. It favors a kind of centralized organizing of society. It's different from left-wing socialism. It's a kind of a right-wing socialism because it approves of family and property and profits and that sort of thing. And always, the common element of all fascistic ideologies is trade war, actually. And that's Donald's number one thing. And I think that the Republican Party has always been basically a fascist party, or at least it has been since World War II, with some exceptions. I mean, Barry Goldwater had a lot of libertarian elements, and Reagan used a lot of libertarian rhetoric. But for the most part, the masses of so-called blue state voters, they're vexed by a kind of fascistic temptation. And, it was amazing to me, Mo, because I didn't know anything about Trump, and I was in Vegas, and he came to a conference I was at. He was speaking, and I listened to him for a full hour, and I recognized all the themes. Yeah, it was so obvious to me. It was just plain as day because I've done a lot of reading in interwar ideological history. I know all about these brown shirts that came to power all over Europe and the United States and Latin America, and Trump just echoes their ideology exactly. I guess it doesn't entirely surprise me. It disappoints me very much. And the thing that upsets me most about it is that people are mystified by it. And one of the reasons they're mystified is they don't know what to call this thing that Trump represents. There's no name for it. We know what a socialist looks like, but we don't talk about fascism. We don't talk about it as a real ideological force. So we've been robbed of the kind of intellectual apparatus and the language that helps us understand people like him. But that's what he represents. That's who he is, and that's what he represents. And it doesn't surprise me at all that he's the front runner, actually.
Now, when you call people fascists, they get offended because fascism is connected to Nazi Germany. Sure. So anytime people call a group of people a fascist, they just get offended. But you call them socialists, they're like, yeah, I accept that.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I wish we could use the word more commonly because I think we need some term to describe right-wing socialism. And by that I mean old-fashioned late 19th century style socialism. I favored obviously central planning and top-down management society. It didn't believe the social order could work on its own. It rejected laissez-faire, but it also had a lot of weird things about it. Like and that's not too weird. I mean, like the average person believes that the social order runs through authority, not through decentralized decision making. But old-fashioned left-wing socialism also was against religion, against the family, and against ownership. Well, that kind of ideology is a little bit unappealing to the average middle-class person. So if you can repackage sort of an authoritarian socialistic style ideology, but get rid of its opposition to faith, family, and property, you have a very powerful kind of ideological structure. And it was exactly that structure that gave rise to people like Mussolini and Franco and Hitler. So who and also of course and nativism, protectionism. This is always part of what they believe in. They believe that blood is a more important connector between people than commerce, for example. So that's part of the fascistic ideology. And it's remarkable to me in a way that in the 21st century anybody would be tempted by this, but at the same time I do think that it represents a kind of a holdover from the old world. I mean, a lot of people today are very panicked about what the new technology means for us, what it means for our society. Change is happening very quickly. People over the age of 50 have nothing in common with the millennials. It was a gigantic generation gap in the way people experience life. And a lot of older, white voters are panicked about this. So when somebody comes along with a fascistic message about restoring the old greatness of America, or whatever the blather is, it appeals to people.
Yeah, and I can't go a day without hearing Donald Trump's name, unfortunately. So it's gonna be a long election.
Well, it is, and the funny thing is that he says a lot of things that are true that nobody else is willing to say. I mean, I do find it fascinating that he's been so open about his opposition to the Iraq War and the disaster that led to. And he's not against war. I mean, he's for war. I mean, he wants more war, but he's just against that war. And that seems to have weirdly connected with Republican voters. The other thing is that he's, like most great dictators in history, he's rising to prominence by drawing attention to the corruption and essential sort of fraudulency of the ruling class. And that's what he's doing. I mean, everything he says about his competitors is right. He's condemning the corruption of the political process. He's promising a way out. And in times when people don't believe in laissez-faire, they don't trust the idea of human liberty, somebody like Donald Trump comes along claiming to have all the answers, that apparently appeals to a lot of people.
Yeah, I give him credit for being straightforward and exposing the corruption, but yet his solution is not the right solution for this country.
His solution is Donald Trump. He wants to be the dictator, the CEO of America. That's the position he thinks he's running for. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between business and government. And they think he can do it. And I don't know. I think the conditions... I mean, Mo, if we have a big financial crisis of some sort between now and the election, I just can't even rule out the possibility that he would immediately become president.
Yeah, I think if he becomes president, he'll break the record for executive orders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the right-wing commentariat in this country, which has rallied behind him in a big way, Glenn Beck accepted, but all the rest of them are all just brown shirts, and they think he's wonderful. They'll cheer him all the way to dictatorship.
Yeah, I can't stand him. Well, it looks like it's going to be a sad election,
yeah.
But I'll deal with it. Well, Jeffrey, I appreciate your time and coming on for the podcast. If people want to find out more about your work and Liberty.me, tell people about Liberty.me and what it is and what they...
It's a publishing platform and a social network and a great place to hang out and download books and talk about ideas with your friends. Come and join us at Liberty.me. And I also work for the Foundation for Economic Education, fee.org. I'm the web developer there, so have a look and see what we're doing there. And my writings also appear in many different places, the Daily Beast and LifeZet and many other places. It's pretty hard to miss.
Yeah, you write about a lot of different topics, from wine to cologne and to Bitcoin. It's a great read.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed it recently. I mean, LifeZet has been a funny thing for me because they kind of contacted me when they launched and they said, we'd like to give you a platform to write about, whatever you want. And I've enjoyed that very much.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on and come back on again.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Mo. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.